Welcome back, friends, to my playthrough of Mass Effect 1 Legendary Edition. This is our second SC episode. SC stands for Secondary Codex, which means in episodes like this we are going to take our time going over the secondary codex entries that we have found so far. Because as you all know, we check out primary codex entries as they come throughout our gameplay. And in SC episodes, there's no gameplay. We exclusively are going to read along the secondary codex entries and analyze it and see how it reflects our journey so far, and see if we can discover new information, new knowledge about the Mass Effect universe by reading between the lines. And yeah, as I explained in the first SC episode, we are going to make SC episodes in between the chapters of this game. And I believe we currently are. We are in between chapters 1 and 2. We just finished most of our business in the Citadel, and now we have options actually as to where to go next. And I have decided to go with finding Liara T'Soni first, which we will do in the next episode. Now, we have accumulated quite the number of secondary codex entries, it would seem. And yeah, just like before, we are going to read it aloud. I am going to try my best to read it as well as the voice actor for the primary codex entries doesn't. And yeah, I think without any further ado, let's start going over the secondary codex entries, shall we? Okay, first category we have for today is aliens, non-council races. Oh my god. Oh, I made a mistake. Shouldn't have gone down. It takes out the blinking parts, but I'm pretty sure all of these entries were blinking earlier. So let's read the first entry we have here. Krogan, Genophage. The Genophage bioweapon was created to end the Krogan rebellions. From the start, the Krogan had overwhelmed the Council. Only timely first contact with the Turians saved the Council races. The Turians fought the Krogan to a standstill, but sheer weight of Krogan numbers indicated the war could not be won through conventional means. The Turians collaborated with the Salarians to genetically engineer a counter to the rapid breeding of the Krogan. The Genophage virus gained the energy to replicate by eating key genetic sequences. Every cell in every Krogan had to be altered for the weapon to be foolproof. Otherwise, the Krogan could have used gene therapy to fix the affected tissues. Once a Genophage strain could find no more genes to eat, it would starve and die, limiting spin-off mutation and contamination. This created genetic flaw is hereditary. The Salarians believed the Genophage would be used as a deterrent, a position the Turians viewed as naive. Once the project was complete, the Turians mass-produced and deployed it. The Krogan homeworld, their colonies, and all occupied worlds were infected. The resulting mutation made only 1 in 1,000 Krogan pregnancies carry to term. It did not reduce fertility, but offspring viability. The rare females able to carry children to term became prizes the Krogan warlords fought brutal battles over. The Krogan are a shadow of their former glory. While the rebellions took place centuries ago, they are constantly reminded of the horror of the genophage and of their inability to counter it. The release of the genophage is still controversial, bitterly debated in many circles. Interesting. Again, most of these codex entries are interesting, which is such good news to me, and I hope to you as well. Excuse me. But yeah, we've heard of the genophage several times at this point, and I didn't quite catch this second paragraph. Let me go over it on my own a little bit. I see. But the most interesting point in this codex entry to me is this how should I say, difference of understanding between the Salarians and the Turians, the two races that collaborated in how should I say, in in executing the genophage plan. The Salarians believed the genophage would be used as a deterrent, written here, but the Turians ended up, like, how should I say, weaponizing it, and well, it is actually a weapon, but ended up mass producing it and deploying it to all Krogan homeworld and the colonies. Which also puts me in mind of the last conversation we had with Rex in the last episode, where he said, yes, the genophage is hard, but that's not the only thing that's killing us. In fact, I think in his words, he said that's not what's killing us. What's killing the Krogans are kind of like their lifestyle. They are scattered all around the galaxy, but not to colonize worlds, but instead because they like to fight, they simply hire themselves out. But here in this third paragraph, it is implied that there are Krogan colonies. Does this mean before the genophage, the Krogans also colonize worlds like most races? And then after the genophage hit, then they start like hiring themselves out more? Or were they reluctant to colonize worlds from the very beginning? But yeah, this is interesting because that conversation we had with Rex implied to me, like what I took from that conversation somehow, is that there's no such thing as a Krogan colony. Like they only have one homeworld, but apparently I was mistaken. And yeah, it is also interesting how they make the distinction between reducing fertility and reducing offspring viability. The latter is what happens with the genophage. Yeah, and obviously this is controversial. Not the least of which because the genophage happens, of course, in response to the rebellions, but after the Krogans played an instrumental part excuse me, in ending the Rachni Wars. So yeah, many shades of grey. I think. Okay, move on to the next entry. Krogan Rebellions. After the Rachni War, the quick-breeding Krogan expanded at the expense of their neighbors. Warlords leveraged their veteran soldiers to seize living space, while the council races were still grateful. Over centuries, the Krogan conquered world after world. There was always just one more needed. When the council finally demanded withdrawal from the Asari colony of Lucia, Krogan overlord Kredak stormed off the Citadel, daring the council to take their worlds back. But the council had taken precautions. The finest STG operators and Asari huntresses had been drafted into a covert observation force, the Office of Special Tactics and Reconnaissance. The Spectres opened the war with crippling strategic strikes. Krogan planets went dark as computer viruses flooded the extranet. Sabotaged antimatter refineries disappeared in blue-white annihilation. Headquarters stations shattered into orbit-clogging debris rammed by pre-placed suicide freighters. Still, this only delayed the inevitable. The war would have been lost if not for first contact with the Turians, who responded to Krogan threats with a prompt declaration of war. Being on the far side of Krogan space from the Council, the Turians advanced rapidly into the lightly defended Krogan rear areas. The Krogan responded by dropping space stations and asteroids on Turian colonies. 3 worlds were rendered completely uninhabitable. This was precisely the wrong approach to take with the Turians. Each is first and foremost a public servant, willing to risk his life to protect his comrades. Rather than increasing public war weariness, Krogan tactics stiffened Turian resolve. The arrival of Turian task forces saved many worlds from the warlords' marauding fleets, but it took development of the genophage bioweapon to end the war. There were decades of unrest afterwards. Rogue warlords and holdout groups of insurgents refused to surrender, or disappeared into the frontier systems to become pirates. I see. I almost think that we should have read this entry first before the last one. But yeah, this entry explained to us in more detail as to what led to and how the Krogan rebellions happened. But yeah, again, this entry also emphasizes just how wrong I was thinking about the Krogans. And actually this has been explained to us before, that the Krogan rebellions happened, or like the when it comes down to it, the Krogan rebellions are the Krogans actually expanding their regions. Colonizing new worlds, I believe, is included in that effort, and due to, as written here, this just one more mentality that kept going, the other council races clapped back basically, and this overlord Kredak doesn't seem to have made the best decision back then. But if I have to choose, the most interesting in this entry is this, the second, I believe the second paragraph here. So the finest STG operators, I'm not sure what the abbreviation stands for, but I'm pretty sure the STG are Salarians, like the Salarian military organization, and Asari huntresses had been drafted into the Spectres, Does this mean the Spectre was founded specifically for this? Like this is the inauguration of the Spectres in response to the Krogan rebellions? I'm not sure. It seems like I'm missing some details about like how the Spectres were founded. And also, yeah, as we also read in the last entry, yeah, the Turians are kind of the ones that were fighting the Krogans in the front lines. Well, they went for the Krogans' rear areas that were lightly defended, but I think like they took the brunt of the fight, right? It seems like the Spectres were handling like these strategic and more tactical, almost like guerrilla battles in the beginning of the fight, and then after the formal declaration of war from the Turians, ever since then the Turians were kind of doing the heavy lifting in terms of military efforts. I forgot how long ago this was, but I'm pretty sure I remember correctly that for their efforts, for the Turians' efforts during the Krogan rebellions, they were invited as a member of the council. Yeah. And yeah, also interesting how, yeah, the Turians, as the fight went on, the Turians have even harder and harder resolve to fight back against the Krogans. Yeah, I think that's admirable of them. That like iron will, basically. Okay, let's move on to the next entry. Quarians Economy. The Migrant fleet has little economic base, operating in a state of perpetual hand-to-mouth. While Quarian ships include light manufacturing and assembly plants, they lack heavy industries such as refining and shipbuilding. The fleet has tankers for water purification and oxygen cracking, but the space-intensive nature of agriculture limits food production. A single disaster could destroy the fragile balance. The Quarians earn income in creative ways because the government is obliged to provide food, water, air, and medical support for every individual. Conclave strategically determines the course of the fleet to bring in resources and income. A species who suspects the Migrant fleet is heading towards their space often offers a gift of surplus starships, fuel, and resources to convince the Conclave to alter course. As the fleet passes through a system, swarms of mining vessels work over asteroids for metals and siliceous materials and cometary bodies for water ice and organics. Quarian miners are adept at locating and strip mining spaceborne resources. This sparks conflict with corporations already working the system. Large mining concerns spend millions on lobbyists and public relations portraying the Quarians as locusts, devouring the resources of a system before moving on. The greatest asset of the Quarians is their rarefied skills. Most are experienced miners. Due to their life of perpetual salvage and repair, they are skilled engineers and technicians. More than once, the very corporations that lobby against the Quarians have made backroom deals with the fleet, arranging for skilled Quarians to fill space engineering jobs that other species would demand higher wages for. Quarians are widely hated among the working classes. "Quarians are coming to take our jobs," is a common response to the fleet's approach. Very interesting how this entry mirrors certain aspects of our present world. Yeah. And we heard from Tali herself how challenging life can be for Quarians. And I don't know, as I understand it, the hope is that they can one day return to their home planet, which is currently occupied by the Geth. And there's another nuance there as well as to how the Geth should live, because in the Geth perspective they were basically just defending themselves because they are sentient, and the Quarians tried to deactivate them early. In Tali's words, before the actual fight broke out, which did end up happening. I wonder if they can coexist in that original homeworld. Because I don't know, they seem to have been managing so far with the Migrant fleet, but it seems like everybody just hate them for it. But it's a hard situation for them, right? But I also find it interesting how through this, how should I say, by persevering through their condition, they excel in the skills related to their survival, right? We can see for ourselves that Tali, as we heard from Engineer Adams, Tali is a very good engineer and technician. And so far I like Tali just fine, and yeah, I believe once you get to know them that Quarians are okay. It's just, yeah, due to their condition, not a lot of people like them, it would seem. Okay, let's move on to the next entry. Orients Government. Due to the Quarians' precarious existence and the need to enforce strict rationing, government is somewhat autocratic. The Migrant fleet's operations are directed by the Admiralty, a board of 5 military officers who are advised by a legislative body called the Conclave. Each vessel in the fleet has the right to send representatives to the Conclave aboard the flagship. The number of representatives is based on crew size. Larger clans with bigger ships and more votes form the cores of political blocs. Opposition comes from the Outriders coalition, with delegates from thousands of smaller ships. The Admiralty defers to the Conclave's decisions in most circumstances. However, if all 5 members agree that a Conclave decision jeopardizes the survival of the fleet and cannot get the Conclave to address their concerns, they have the right to summarily overturn the legislative decision. After the Admiralty uses this extraordinary power, they must resign. If the Admiralty does not step down after using their veto, the rest of the military is obliged to arrest them. Each ship captain has authority over his vessel, but is advised by an elected civilian council, just as the Admiralty is advised by the Conclave. This relationship may range from cooperation to polite tolerance to outright hostility. But any captain who overrules his council without good reason is relieved of command by the Admiralty. Many Quarian ships are owned by clans who pool their resources to purchase used vessels from private sellers. Large ships are prestigious for big, rich clans, but a small ship means status for a small clan with enough personal wealth to afford a private vessel. Clan vessel captains are not subject to dismissal by the Admiralty. Abusive captains are a family problem if they do not disrupt the operations of the fleet. I see. We heard parts of this codex entry from Tally, of course. How there are 5 admirals and they can overturn the conclave, but after that they need to resign because that's such an extraordinary power. And yeah, each ships also employs a similar approach. When there is a captain advised by the elected council, and I believe, as Tally put it, the captains are also helps out the pilgrimage, right? Because the things people find in the pilgrimage are brought back as a gift to the captain of their ship, right? And it is considered a very especially like bad case if the captain rejects the result of one's pilgrimage. Yeah, this falls in line with what Tally explained to us, obviously. I wonder how people go back to the fleet, how they keep track of where the fleet currently is. Maybe we'll find out in the next entries. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Quarians, Migrant Fleet. The Migrant Fleet is the largest concentration of star-faring vessels in the galaxy, sprawling across millions of kilometers. It can take days for the entire fleet to pass through a mass relay. When the Quarians fled their homeworld, the fleet was a motley aggregation of freighters, shuttles, industrial vessels, and the odd warship. After 3 centuries, all have been modified to support larger crews as comfortably as possible. As the Quarians achieved stability, they began weeding out the ships least suitable for long-term habitation, selling them and pooling the money to buy larger and more space-worthy hulls. This process is ongoing as vessels wear out and break down. While some ships enjoy dedicated cabins with full privacy and sanitary facilities, many more are former freighters, whose cargo bays and containers are pressurized and divided into family spaces using simple metal cubicle bulkheads. The Quarians enliven these austere spaces with colorful quilts and tapestries, which also help muffle sound. The day-to-day operations of the fleet, traffic control, station keeping, supply distribution, and so on, are under military jurisdiction. Though ship captains have the authority to deviate from their assigned positions and may leave the fleet at any time, they are assumed to do so at their own risk. As the Migrant Fleet moves around the galaxy, many ships split off to pursue individual goals, returning days or years later. Interesting. This one didn't tell us how the Quarians who are on a pilgrimage keep track of the Migrant Fleet, or as we find out here, how the ships that peeled off from the migrant fleet keep track of the fleet to return, but they seem to have a way to do so. But yeah, this codex entry really puts in mind the scale of the migrant fleet. It can take days for the entire fleet to pass through a mass relay. Days just for the fleet to pass through a mass relay. I imagine this would be one more reason why other races would hold some contempt against the Quarian. Maybe they were trying to use the mass relay, but then the fleet has to like go through it and they got delayed in their travels or something like that. I don't know. I can see that happening. But yeah, they keep buying secondhand ships. Unfortunately, most of them were not designed for like large scale and long-term habitation. And we learned from 2 codex entries ago that despite their, how should I say, their aptitude with engineering and technology, they lack the resources and the tools mainly to manufacture their own ships, right? Had they access to such tools, maybe they would have a fleet consisting of ships with better living conditions. But yeah, that's about the migrant fleet. Let's move on to the next entry. Quarians Pilgrimage. When Quarians of the migrant fleet reach young adulthood, they must leave their birth ship and find a new crew to accept them as permanent residents. To prove themselves, they must recover something of value. This is offered to their prospective captain as proof that they will not be a mere burden on the shoestring resources of the ship. This process is called the pilgrimage. Stripped of ritual, the pilgrimage is merely an attempt to maintain genetic diversity within the small, relatively isolated population bases that make up the migrant fleet. If the young stayed and married within their birth vessel, the risk of inbreeding would increase sharply. Quarians are surgically fitted with their various immunity-boosting implants in preparation for leaving on pilgrimage. Having grown up within the sterile, controlled environments of the migrant fleet ships, Quarians have virtually no natural immune system. Yeah, again, we heard most of these from Tally as well, and we even discussed this not too long ago, earlier in this episode. But the detail I left out is, how the pilgrimage is also an attempt to maintain genetic diversity. When I first heard that from Tally, I thought, wait, so behind the face mask they are quite different genetically from one another? And then I read this codex entry and I was like, what was I thinking? Even us humans are genetically different from one another, right? It's more about like if they don't do this, the risk of inbreeding would increase sharply, and generally you don't want that to happen. And though I wonder, having read this codex entry, so Quarians must leave their birth ship and find a new crew to accept them as permanent residents. So do they normally move to another Quarian ship in the Migrant fleet? Basically what I'm thinking about is what Tali is doing, actually going out of the fleet and becoming a crew of a non-Quarian ship. I'm thinking this is very rare. Because of course, earlier in episode 3, Ambassador sorry, not episode 3. How can that be episode 3? A couple of episodes ago, Ambassador Udina, upon seeing Tali, was quite perplexed that a Quarian like her is far away from the flotilla, from the Migrant fleet. So I don't know, but I get the impression that what Tali is doing is quite rare. Before reading this entry, I thought the pilgrimage would be like what Tali is doing, like they move to like completely different ship, like a non-Quarian ship somewhere out there, and then after some time, after like months or years, they come back to the Quarian fleet, bring back something of value presented to their captain, and basically come of age, right? I don't know, maybe we'll learn more about this from Tali as well. But that's about it for the aliens non-council races category. We still have like 5 more categories, guys. I can see how this is going to be a long episode, but let's see how much longer this episode actually will be. Okay, second category for today: Citadel and Galactic Government. Okay, entry 1. Citadel Station, Presidium Ring. The ring is an enclosed loop of park-like space serving as the connection point for the wards. The interior walls are lined with the embassies of influential species and private residences for the galaxy's elite. The Presidium is full of open-air restaurants, bars, and luxurious meeting areas. Gravity is about a third Earth normal. A holographic sky is projected over the ceiling of the ring. Unlike the 24/7 bustle of the wards, the Presidium maintains a 20-hour day schedule, with a 6-hour night where lights are dimmed and the sky goes through a night cycle. Offices and residences are often open to the interior. It is not unusual for embassies to have no exterior wall at all. This does not cause a crime problem due to the heavy CSEC presence and ubiquitous monitoring devices on the Presidium. Thieves are quickly identified and apprehended. The ring is the location of the Citadel's spaceports. Being closer to the center of spin, there is less motion for a ship to match, and the reduced spin gravity makes handling cargo easier. Hundreds of ships pass through the Citadel every day, and every species with an embassy is granted a private dock. The tower at the center of the ring holds the administration of the Citadel Council. The tower rises over a kilometer from the ring, appearing to thrust forward parallel to the ward arms. As the tower is at the center of the spin axis, it experiences little centrifugal force. Gravity is maintained using mass effect fields at a 90-degree angle to the ring and wards. A consular dock can be found at the base of the tower. While normally used for diplomatic couriers and Spectre business, the shuttles docked here can evacuate the council government in an emergency. Okay, so I'm not that good at like geometry and 3D thinking, but some of you may have picked up on my confusion as to how the Presidium is shaped. And this entry promises to be that answer, but we may have to take some time to fully understand it. So my main confusion is with the curvature of the Presidium, right? So having read this entry, it seems like the Presidium is not like a horizontal ring, but a vertical one, right? Which would explain the curvature where the cars fly through. But why make it like that? Is it because the people in the wards live like... Oh, that would explain it actually. The people in both the Presidium and the wards have the same like geometric orientation, like, right? Like they are axes, like y-axes, x-axes, z-axes of how they walk, they navigate is the same. But then there's this explanation about the tower. So we can see right there, top right of our screen, that jutting out part, that's not the tower, right? That's just like a walkway almost to that dot in the center, and from the center the tower juts out parallel to the wards. Right, yeah, here in this paragraph. But when we were on the Presidium, we can see that to go to the Citadel Tower is simply like there was like a very straightforward elevator, right? But assuming we were not misunderstanding, we have not been misunderstanding anything so far, and that can't be, right? That elevator would only take us through that horizontal line we see, the top right image. We still would have to go like parallel towards us, jutting out from the screen. Maybe I'm missing something as to how that Citadel Tower elevator specifically works, but I think it makes more sense now. The shape of the Presidium, that curvature, I'm not that like that part makes more sense to me now. I'm not wondering as much about that anymore. It's just that Citadel Tower elevator, I'm still thinking about it. If you've already figured any of this out, do let me know, because yeah, details like this intrigues me, which is why we're having like these SC episodes in the first place, and why we check out the primary codex entries as we go. But yeah, interesting. Okay, next entry. Citadel Station, Serpent Nebula. The Citadel is surrounded by a blue-tinted reflection nebula. The light of the nebula is actually light from the Citadel, scattered and reflected back at the station. At first, the Serpent Nebula was assumed to be made of microscopic construction debris. Prevailing theory holds that the Protheans used molecular nanotechnology to manufacture the incredibly durable materials used in the Citadel. But unlike other nebulae, the Serpent does not dissipate over time. Therefore, it must be replenished constantly. The current popular theory is that the non-recyclable waste collected by the Citadel's keepers is somehow rendered down to the atomic or molecular level and ejected into the cloud. The thick nebula presents a navigation hazard. Beyond the relatively clear areas around the Citadel, electrical discharges are common. These are not blocked by kinetic barriers and can severely damage metal-framed starships. In addition, some dense knots of dust can overwhelm the repulsion of kinetic barriers on smaller ships. If such a vessel is moving fast enough at the time, the effects are similar to being hit by a sand blaster. Attempting to reach the Citadel through open space navigation is unadvisable. The only safe approach is through the various mass relays that orbit it. I see. Yeah, one other interesting thing that I forgot to mention after reading the last codex entry is that there were mentions of ships flying through the Citadel. And in our case, we came from the far side of the wards. Far side of the Presidium ring, I suppose. And then we go into the dock. And as the last codex entry also mentioned, that most docks are actually around the Presidium for various reasons. But I wonder if starships actually come from like the near side of the Presidium ring towards us in this in the screen when referring to the image in the top right of our screen currently, because that would be the literal definition of flying through the Citadel, right? In our case, we didn't go through the rings, but I wonder if that's also something that happens. And here we actually learn more about the nebula and how challenging it is to navigate the Citadel. Yeah, the only way is to use the various mass relays that orbit it. And I'm not sure what a sand blaster is. Is that a Mass Effect universe specific thing, or do we also have it in real life? I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a tiny bit of this entry that also piqued my interest. And yeah, that's the Serpent Nebula, where the Citadel is. Yeah, and also it's interesting that the light of the nebula is actually from the Citadel itself, just scattered and reflected back at the station. Yeah, I wonder what powers the Citadel in the first place. The Keepers would know, but of course we have no way of communicating with the Keepers. Okay, let's move on to the next entry. Citadel Station, wards. The majority of the Citadel's population lives in the wards, the 5 massive arms of the station that house the residential and commercial districts. Many galactic races have established cultural enclaves here. Population density and cost of living are extremely high, akin to Earth cities such as Hong Kong and Singapore. The wards are open-topped with skyscrapers rising from the superstructure. Towers are sealed against vacuum, as the breathable atmosphere envelope is only maintained to a height of about 7 meters. The atmosphere is contained by the centrifugal force of rotation and a membrane of dense, colorless sulfur hexafluoride gas, held in place by carefully managed Mass Effect fields. The view from the wards is spectacular. In the background, stars, Serpent Nebula, and the nearby blue giant called the Widow move across the sky as the station rotates to stabilize itself. In the foreground, the lights of buildings and vehicles on the opposing ward arms perpetually shine. The Citadel has no real day or night. While the station keeps to standard galactic time for political functions, businesses rarely close, and residents acclimate to sleep and work according to personal need rather than a day-night cycle. Additions and modifications are constantly being constructed. though they must stay within certain specifications that will not compromise the operation of the station. Occasionally, the keepers will descend on an area of the wards and move or change the architecture without explanation. Residents have learned to live with these inexplicable intrusions. Okay, this codex entry reminds me of the other interesting points from the other codex entries that I forgot to mention, such as the day-night cycle in the Citadel. Yeah, it is interesting that, yeah, being a space station and being in no proximity to a star, there is no real day-night cycle in the Citadel, and people kinda decide on their own biological clocks, apparently. And another thing is, again, the shape of the Presidium. Sorry for keeping on bringing this point up, but as we covered before, the Citadel Tower juts out parallel to the wards, right? And it is established that the Presidium ring have the same geometric orientation as the wards, right? So if a person is standing upright on the wards, they are also standing upright in the Presidium, right? They don't have to change much of their position. But then you have that Citadel Tower jutting out like that. Why aren't the Presidium constructed to have that same orientation, right? Basically, the people in the Presidiums live and stands perpendicular to the people on the wards. But that's not what's happening. The only anomaly in terms of again, the geometry and how people stand on the X, Y, and Z axes are the Citadel Tower, sorry. That's the only anomaly. Everybody else stands in the same planes, so to speak. Okay. And also interesting how the wards are open topped, but the atmosphere, simply saying, is only up to 7 meters. That's like, what, a 2-story building? And everything above that are vacuum sealed. So if you have we have an action scene in a skyscraper in the wards, we punch someone out of the windows, they're gonna be sucked out into space, basically. I wonder if we're gonna see anything like that in this series. But yeah, and also the view from the wards is spectacular, as we have seen ourselves. Like the view, just outside of the staircases that leads to the Flux nightclub, as described here in this codex entry as well. We have the wards, we have the nebula, and yeah, I forgot to notice, but everything is spinning, right? And yeah, the only thing I'm not so sure about is this blue giant called the Widow. I wonder what that means and looks like. Is it visible from the wards, from the balconies on the wards that we've been to? Not so sure. But yeah, that's about it for this entry and also for this category actually. Now we move on to the next one. Can't believe we still have 4 more. We've only been through 2 of them. I wonder if I should split this episode into 2. I don't think so, but let's see. Okay, the next category. Humanity and the Systems Alliance. I wonder if... Okay, so if the first entry in the category is new, we won't notice because the cursor is directly on top of it, and were it blinking, we won't notice that because placing the cursor above them removes the blinking part. But I'm pretty sure we haven't read this one. I think we read this one in the last SC episode, and we read this one earlier in this episode. So let's read this one. Human diplomatic relations. Humanity has encountered many galactic species. Wars have been few, but mistrust is rife. Politically, the Alliance is a peaceful trade partner of the Turians. As a practical matter, however, there is simmering antagonism and bigotry between both populations over the First Contact War of 2157. The Alliance enjoys good relations with the Asari, though many privately believe the matriarchs are aristocratic and overcautious. Though humans know better than to unconditionally trust any Salarian, their shared restless, reckless ways make them natural allies against the conservative Turians and Asari. The Krogan have no unified government, but individuals are generally treated as potential criminals, a reputation most Krogan enjoy living down to. The Alliance has no formal contact with the Quarians. Their migrant fleet has not yet passed through any human-settled system. The Batarians are rivals for control of the Skyllian Verge. They severed their treaties with the Citadel to prosecute a colonial conflict against the Alliance. Officially, there is no war, but neither is there any peace. Interesting. This codex entry explains to us the relation between humanity and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 alien races. There are more, of course. Off the top of my head, there are the Elcors, the Voldas, the Hanars, the Geth, of course, the Rachni, though I suppose they're extinct now. And yeah, there are more races in the Milky Way galaxy than there are written in this codex entry, but nevertheless, it is interesting to learn this. We know what the deal is with the Turians, and I'm thankful how most Turians we met or we came across have been cordial, with the exception of Saren, of course. But the others, Garrus, Nihilus, Executor Pollen, they are reasonably respectful, I find. The Asari, I believe we've only met like council member Tevos, I think her name is, and also the consort Nelina, and yeah, those are the Asari that we have interacted with so far, and yeah, we enjoy good relations with them, as this codex entry says. Salarians. Pretty sure the only Salarian we've interacted with are council member Valor, I think his name is, Morland, down in the Wards Markets, and Chorban, the one that asked us to scan the keepers. And yeah, I can't imagine how. So the first races to find the council, the Citadel Council, are the Asari and Solarians, right? I just thought of how different they are in terms of lifespans. The Asari live for 1,000 years, whereas the Solarians only live to like 40. So, like, we're in the middle, right? Much closer to Solarians' lifespan, of course, but like Solarians view humans, the Asari view humans as, I don't know, much more a species that in a much more of a hurry compared to them. Just like to draw parallels, like how an elf would perceive a human in like the Tolkien legendarium, right? And most elves in any pop culture IP, I suppose. But maybe the Asari in Mass Effect universe won't be that surprised, like when they see humans, like lifestyles and everything, because they have been interacting with the Solarians for far longer, and the Solarians are in even more of a hurry compared to humans, right? In fact, we kind of perceive the Solarians in the same light, and that is rare, I think, in franchises and in universes, in pop culture universes like this. Most of the other races live longer lives compared to humans, right? Not the Solarians. The Solarians are unique, I think, and their relationship with the Asari is even more so, right? The relationship between the Asari and the Solarians, I suppose. Yeah, the Krogans, interesting that they would enjoy living down to their treatment as potential criminals, which would make sense. As Rex put it, the Krogans really like to fight. And also interesting that the Migrant fleet has not yet passed through any human settled system. And as we heard from Tali, and we learned from the codex entries, the Quarians were driven out from their homeworld in about like 3 centuries ago, right? That happened in about 3 centuries. And in that time, the Migrant fleet has yet to pass any human settled system. But this also reminds me of another interesting point that I forgot to point out, which is the Quarians have virtually no immunity because they have been so used to living in the Migrant fleet, which is sterile and very controlled. But that happened 300 years ago. That seems quite short in terms of evolution, right? I mean, it is a very extreme living condition, and Quarian physiology and evolution would differ from humans. It would make sense for those aspects to be different, but I just find it interesting, like, to the best of my knowledge, which is admittedly is not that good, the humans in the present and the humans in like the 1700s, give or take 3 centuries ago, right, are not that different, right? Do let me know if I'm mistaken, guys. But yeah, I find that quite interesting. And of course, the Batarians, our rivals for control of the Skillian Verge, as this codex entry puts it. They are involved in at least 2 out of the 3. This psychological profile that we can choose when we defined our Commander Shepard, right? So yeah, I wonder if we are going to meet some Batarians in these. I'm sure in this series we're going to meet some of them, but I wonder if we'll do so in this game. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the kinds of interactions that we are going to have, especially considering our background that shared that past with the Batarians. Of course, we chose War Hero for those of you who missed it. But yeah, okay, let's move on to the next entry. Systems Alliance. Military ranks. The Alliance uses a modified version of the ranking system that has been used for hundreds of years. Soldiers are classified into rank and file enlisted personnel, experienced non-commissioned officers, or NCOs, and specially trained officers. The divide between naval personnel and ground forces, or Marines, is small. Ground units are a specialized branch of the fleet, just as fighter squadrons are. This unity of command is imposed by the futility of fighting without control of orbit. Without the Navy, any army is pointless. The Marines, as a matter of pride, maintain some of their traditional rank titles. For example, Marines have privates and corporals instead of servicemen. In ascending order of responsibility, the ranks of the Alliance are for the enlisted, servicemen 3rd class or private 2nd class, servicemen 2nd class or private 1st class, servicemen 1st class or corporal. For NCOs, service chief, gunnery chief, operations chief. For officers, 2nd lieutenant, 1st lieutenant, staff lieutenant, lieutenant commander, staff commander, captain or major, rear admiral or general, admiral, and fleet admiral. I see. I'm not that familiar with military ranks in our present Earth, so I'm not, how should I say, not enough of this codex entry registers with me as much as I want to. So wait, there's Navy, and the ground forces are the Marines, right? Okay, and the Navy and the Marines use slightly different rank titles. And in this list, I believe the left ones are the Navy. Yeah, and then the right ones are the Marines. And if we... sorry. And I think this is like in ascending order, right? The enlisted, the NCOs, the officers. Ashley is a gunnery chief. I believe Caden is a lieutenant commander, and Shepard is a staff commander. I assume that's the same as commander, right? Because I don't think we have heard someone said Staff Commander Shepard. I don't think that's a thing. People say Commander Shepard. And Captain Anderson is above us in rank. And we've met our Rear Admiral Kahoku, which we are helping to find one of his missing ships, right? And I believe he doesn't specifically fit in this military ranks, but we met a General Septimus. He's a Turian though, so that's why I said maybe he doesn't fit into this military ranks. Maybe it's a little bit different in the Turian side of things. I don't think we've met Admiral or Fleet Admiral so far. Yeah, that's about it for this entry and this category. Let's move on to the next one. Planets and locations. Oh, we only have one. Stations. Arcturus stations. Sorry, Arcturus station. Arcturus station is the gateway to Sol, a 5-kilometer diameter Stanford Torus type space station at the trailing Lagrange point of the gas giant Themis. Construction on Arcturus station began in 2151 and concluded in 2162. It was inaugurated in 2156 and has served as the military and political headquarters of the Systems Alliance from the First Contact War until the present. When humanity activated the Charon mass relay in 2149, it led to Arcturus, 36 light-years from Sol, Earth's sun. Arcturus is the third brightest star seen from Earth. It is an ancient red giant from the generation born before Sol. Its worlds are either gas giants or ice chunks. While some rocky debris exists, the metal content is 25% lower than normal. To build Arcturus station, metallic asteroids were towed through the mass relays to the construction site. Many of these asteroids remain near the station. They are mined out areas home to transient populations. The expense of bringing construction materials into the system was acceptable due to its strategic value. With 3 primary mass relays, in addition to the secondary one to Sol, Arcturus is a major communications and military choke point. The Alliance First Fleet is based in Arcturus, where it can guard the gates to Sol and react to incursions in the 3 connected clusters. The station also hosts the Systems Alliance Parliament and the Systems Alliance Military General Headquarters. Its permanent population is approximately 45,000. Arcturus is actually from the galactic halo, one of a cluster of 52 stars that are crashing through the disk of the galaxy. In 1 billion years, Arcturus will be sailing through the depths of extragalactic dark space. Wow, that was quite the codex entry, guys. I'm still not sure. So Arcturus station is clearly a space station, but there's also a star called Arcturus in the area, which is the 3rd brightest star seen from Earth. Okay. And yeah, it took 11 years. The Arcturus station, took 11 years to build, but inaugurated 5 years into the construction. So I believe in 5 years the space station was fully operational. In the words of the Emperor from Star Wars. I think that was a terrible impressions, I guess, but yeah. So yeah, fully operational within 5 years of construction, and to this day is still the military unpolitical headquarters of the system's alliance. Of course, interesting that, yeah, people tow actual asteroids passing through the mass relays, going to where the Arcturus station is right now and build out a space station. I can only imagine how it looks. And also, yeah, interesting that Arcturus is a major communications and military choke point due to the 3 primary mass relays and the secondary one to Sol. So does that mean the Charon mass relay is a secondary one? I'm not so sure, because the 3 primary mass relays doesn't point to Sol, right? But yeah, I think Ashley also mentioned something like this. Oh no, I think what she compared the Citadel to Jump Zero, I believe, which I don't think is the Arcturus station. But yeah, the comparison is there. The Arcturus station's population is about 45,000, whereas the Citadel is in the millions, right? So that explains the awe that Shepard, Ashley, and Caden found themselves in when they came into the wards. The Citadel is that much bigger. And also, finally, yeah, it is interesting that Arcturus is actually from the center of the galaxy, and of course our universe, and thus the Mass Effect universe that are based in our reality in a lot of ways. Both of our universes expand, right? So in a billion years, the Arcturus, the sun, and thus the space station, I guess, will be sailing through the depths of extragalactic dark space. Wonder what that says about like Sol and Earth. Basically, every part of the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, will behave in the same way, right? As everything expands. Okay, that's about it for this entry and this category. We move on to the next one. Ships and vehicles. I believe we have yet to read this one, so here we go. Starships, crew considerations. Cabins give each individual 10 cubic meters of space. On larger vessels, private rooms are common. As ships get smaller, the number of crew packed into a single wardroom increases. Asari prefer shared spaces even on large vessels, while Krogan territorial instincts make it impossible for them to cohabitate even on the smallest ships. On smaller vessels, hot bunking is the norm. Crew members assigned to different watches share the same bunk. When one gets off duty, he wakes up the person in the bunk. While that crewman is on duty, the first gets his rack time. Spacecraft compartments can be isolated by airtight doors in case of decompression. The cinematic vision of explosive decompression is fiction. Hold compartments either take enough damage that occupants are killed instantly, or leak slowly enough that they are able to reach protective gear. Compartments are equipped with emergency life support apparatus, fireproof plastic bubbles with air bottles. Small and stowed, Elsa comfortably accommodate one individual inflated. Damage control procedure cuts off ventilation to burning compartments. Without oxygen to consume, fires die in seconds. The compartment is repressurized afterwards for crew recovery. Mass effect fields create an artificial gravity, or A-grav, plane below the decks, preventing muscle atrophy and bone loss in 0G. Large vessels arrange their decks perpendicular to their thrust axis. The highest decks are at the bow, and the lowest at the engines. This allows A-grav to work with the inertial effects of thrust. Ships that can land arrange their decks laterally, so the crew can move about while the vessel is on the ground. Warships normally turn off their A-grav systems during combat, reducing the heat generated by systems and increasing combat endurance. To provide a point of reference for navigating in 0G, floors are painted a different color from the walls and ceiling. I see. It's quite the entry to wrap my head around, guys, I'm gonna be honest. Okay. So, 10 cubic meters of space. That's not that much, right? And yeah, so Asari is the opposite of Krogan in terms of sharing space. Interesting. And yeah, explosive decompression is apparently fiction, guys. Makes sense though, in the vacuum of space, there's nothing to catch fire onto, right? So I know the entry said cinematic vision of explosive decompression is fiction, but I believe the Interstellar one, the one in Interstellar, among other depictions, are quite realistic, right? I think when the ship broke down, we didn't see any fire, right? It's just like the ship was like how should I say? Like parts of the ship like detached from one another, kinda, which I guess is what would happen. And yeah, if the hole in the compartments are big enough for something like that to happen, and people couldn't reach their protective gear, they would die instantly. Or if they're just small punctures, people would have time to reach for protective gear. One such gear is Elsa. What a funny abbreviation. Oh, by the way, and of course, Interstellar was released considerably far after this game was originally released. This game originally released in 2007. Interstellar was released in what? 2014, I believe. So yeah, just something interesting there. Maybe one of the Interstellar filmmakers like learned of these things, not necessarily from this game, but I believe they learn of these things and pay attention to it, so that they depict the, what is the term? Explosive decompression? No, they depict decompression more realistically. And yeah, here's an explanation about Elsa. Emergency life support apparatus. And yeah, nothing to add from me in terms of this tool, I suppose. Yeah, this artificial gravity stuff, I haven't quite understood it, to be honest. Yeah, we have artificial gravity in the Normandy, I believe. Large vessels arrange their decks perpendicular to their thrust axis. Oh, I think I get it. But I don't think this happens with the Normandy, right? Which I guess is because and implies that Normandy is not that large of a vessel. And also because Normandy is a ship that can land. That's why they arrange their decks laterally instead of like perpendicular to the thrust axis. Like arranging decks perpendicular to the thrust axis is basically how, not exactly like the rockets we have here in present time Earth, but kind of like imagine a tower that can go to space. That's how decks are arranged perpendicular to the thrust axis, right? Which they explain here. They do that because it allows an artificial gravity to work with the inertial effects of thrust, which makes sense, right? When the ship flies away, the inertial effects already kind of simulates gravity, so maybe less effort is needed to create the agrav, which, as I understand, normally take quite a toll in the systems, right? Here, warships to the point that warships normally turn off artificial gravity to reduce heat generated by systems and therefore increasing combat endurance. And also interesting how they painted floors differently to provide a point of reference when navigating in zero gravity. I didn't pay attention to it, but let's see whether Normandy does this. Okay, that's quite the lengthy codex entry, guys. We're gonna move on to the next one now. Starships, cruisers. Cruiserweight starships are the standard combat unit encountered away from large naval bases, the war-bloody infantry of most fleets. Nimble scouting frigates have neither the punch nor the stamina to stand up to serious combat, and the mighty dreadnoughts are a strategic resource, carefully hoarded and committed to the most critical battles. Cruisers perform routine independent show-the-flag patrols in settled systems and lead flotillas of frigates in small engagements, such as pirate suppression campaigns. In major fleet engagements, cruiser squadrons support the dreadnought battle line by screening their flanks against enemies attempting to maneuver for a main gun bowshot from their vulnerable broadsides. Alliance cruisers are named after cities of Earth. I see. Interesting how cruisers are perceived, or bloody infantry of most fleets. So I think that also implies how important they are, right? And yeah, this codex entry compares the cruisers to the smaller frigates and the much larger dreadnoughts. And one of their roles in battle is to screen the flanks of dreadnoughts. And we have heard of some of the names of the cruisers. I think Navigator Presley was on the Tokyo, right? Was Captain Anderson on the Tokyo as well? I think somebody else was on the Tokyo as well. Maybe Engineer Adams? I don't quite remember, guys, but yeah. That's one name of the cruisers that I remember, the Tokyo. Okay. This entry is quite not nearly as long as the last one. So let's move on to the next one. Starships Dreadnought. The Dreadnought is the ultimate arbiter of space warfare. Millions of tons of metal, ceramic, and polymer dedicated to the projection of firepower against an enemy vessel of like ability. No sane commander would face a Dreadnought with anything less than another Dreadnought. Dreadnought's power lies in the length of its main gun. Dreadnoughts range from 800 meters to 1 kilometer long. A main gun of commensurate length, an 800-meter mass accelerator is capable of accelerating one 2-kilogram slug to a velocity of 283 kilometers per second every 2 seconds. Each slug has the kinetic energy of 38 kilotons of TNT, 3 times the energy released by the fission weapon that destroyed Hiroshima. When used to bombard planets, some of this kinetic energy is lost due to atmospheric re-entry friction. As a rule of thumb, each Earth atmosphere of air pressure saps approximately 20% of a projectile's impact energy. The Turian fleet presently has 37 dreadnoughts, the SR-21 and the Orients 16. Humanity has 6, with an additional hull under construction at Arcturus Station. Alliance battleships are named for mountains of Earth: Everest class, Everest, Fuji, Elbrus; Kilimanjaro class, Kilimanjaro, Taishan, Shasta; Aconcagua under construction. Interesting. So normally a dreadnought packs a gun that can shoot 3 times the energy released by the fission weapon that destroyed Hiroshima every 2 seconds. Very, very powerful machines of war these dreadnoughts are. Yeah, I find this also interesting. I'm no astrophysicist, in case that's not obvious yet, but I wonder if the math is right here, that each Earth atmosphere of air pressure would sap about 20% of such projectiles' impact energy, which would still be devastating for the planet. And also another interesting thing is, I think in one of the other codex entries we learned that there is a certain ratio of dreadnoughts, number of dreadnoughts, right? Like it is 5 to 3 to 1 for like the Turians compared to both the Asari and the Solarians, as compared to any other races, right? Which would mean for every one of humanity's dreadnoughts there are about 3 Asari and Solarian dreadnoughts, which I think kinda lines up. The math kinda lines up, right? And then for each of humanity dreadnoughts there's about 5 Turian ones. Yeah, of course the math doesn't line up perfectly, not a round number, but it stands. The ratio stands, which goes to show how detailed they are when they're writing these codex entries. I love it. I love it so much. And also, last but not least, interesting that we have 2 classes so far of dreadnoughts. Wonder how they compare the Everest and the Kilimanjaro classes. Are they different in terms of size, or maybe in terms of eras? because Aconcagua, the latest one, is in Kilimanjaro class. But yeah, quite the interesting entry. We move on to the next one. Starships Fighters. Fighters are single-pilot combat small craft. They are lightweight enough that they can be economically fitted with powerful Element Zero cores, making them capable of greater acceleration and sharper maneuvers than starships. Kinetic Barrier shields changed starship battles from short, vicious bloodbaths to extended, indecisive slugging matches. Only the main gun of a dreadnought could punch a mass accelerator slug through the barriers, often opposing dreadnought. This changed with the development of the fighter-launched mass disruptor torpedo, a short-ranged weapon that can penetrate kinetic barriers to destroy air projector assemblies. Starship Guardian defenses must be overwhelmed through swarm tactics. Fighter groups can take heavy casualties pressing their torpedo attacks home. Once fighter-launched torpedoes have crippled an enemy's barriers, the mass accelerators on frigates and cruisers can make short work of them. Interceptors are a type of fighter optimized to attack other fighters, with no ability to damage starships. Interceptors are used to screen friendly units from incoming fighter attack. Interesting. Starting to lose my voice, I think, guys. But I think we're almost there, kinda. So yeah, let's continue with analyzing this codex entry. Makes sense how fighters would be capable of greater acceleration and sharper maneuvers compared to any of the starships. And yeah, so most of the time fighters cannot do any respectable damage to dreadnoughts, but an exception is made for the mass disruptor torpedo, which can, I'm not sure what this projector assemblies are. Maybe assemblies that project kinetic barrier shields? I'm not sure. No. There are kinetic barriers that protect the projector assemblies. Not sure what the projector assemblies are for. But presumably destroying a projector assembly of a starship is causes quite the devastating damage. At least that's my understanding. And I'm not sure what this Starship Guardian defenses look like or what its role is. Oh, never mind. This is sorry. This paragraph right here is exactly the explanation towards my questions. So the fighter would launch torpedoes to cripple the enemy's barriers, this we know, and after which the frigates and cruisers can do respectable damage to said starship, including the dreadnoughts then, I believe. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Okay. And I think we learned about the interceptors somehow from one of the previous codex entries that we checked out. And yeah, they don't do torpedoes, they intercept other fighters that are trying to torpedo the Inceptor side's starships. I see. Not quite sure what they mean here by extended indecisive slugging matches. Because we still got the fighters still got the torpedoes, right? Which is like a lead up to considerable damage from the frigates and cruisers even. But yeah, overall an interesting explanation as to how space battles are fought. I don't think we have seen fighters so far. Well, I suppose we haven't seen much starships at this point. We saw Sarens, we saw the Ascension, the flagship of the Citadel Council, right? It's like not sure if that flagship belongs to one specific race, but pretty sure that that's a dreadnought then, based on like Ashley's comments about how big both the ship and the cannons are. So yeah, interesting. Move on to the next entry. Starships frigates. Frigates are light escort and scouting vessels. They often have extensive Guardian systems to provide anti-fighter screening for capital ships, and carry a squad of Marines for security and groundside duty. Unlike larger vessels, frigates are able to land on planets. Frigate drive systems allow them to achieve high FTL cruise speeds. They also have proportionally large thrusters and lighter design mass, allowing them to maneuver more handily. In combat, speed and maneuverability make a frigate immune to the long-range fire of larger vessels. In the time it takes projectiles to reach them, frigates are no longer where they were predicted to be. In fleet combat, frigates are organized into wolfpack flotillas of 4 to 6. Wolfpacks speed through enemy formations, hunting enemy vessels whose kinetic barriers have been taken down by fighter-launched disruptor torpedoes. The Wolfpack circle straves vulnerable targets, using their superior speed and maneuverability to evade return fire. Alliance frigates are named for great battles in human history. I love how one codex entry may explain another. The interconnection between codex entries, which on their own most of the time are already detailed and interesting, when taken and understood as a whole, just immerses you even deeper into the universe. And that's the mentality I maintain throughout this playthrough. Like I want to be drowning in these lore. Yeah, but much of this codex entry explains my questions from the last one, so we were correct in some aspects. So yeah, namely the fighters would use their torpedoes to take out the kinetic barriers of starships of any kind, frigates, cruisers, even dreadnoughts. And then the wolf pack of frigates move in, being faster than other types of starships. And then they circle strafe their targets, evading return fire, and then just devastate said starship, right? So yeah, this further elaborates how space battles are fought. And also, I find it interesting that frigates like, what should I say? The advantage of frigates is squarely on their speed, right? So much so that when the longer range guns are fired on them, such as the ones on dreadnoughts, I believe that comparison is apt. Frigates are usually no longer where they were. And I imagine in space battles, yeah, like distance and speed really are perceived much differently than like present Earth, because we're dealing with like light speeds here, like, as most of you know, I'm sure, like when it comes to space, the scale is so vast, so much so that when we look at the stars right now, our present Earth, we look at the stars, we're actually looking to the past technically, because the space is so vast that the light takes so long to reach our eyes, right? And such things take place in space battles too, to a much lesser degree, I would imagine, but still, even here we kind of get that sense of how different speed and distance is perceived in space, and in relation in space battles as well. I find it interesting. Okay, let's move on to the next entry. Starships Thrusters. A mass effect drive core decreases the mass of a bubble of space-time around the ship. This gives the ship the potential to move quickly, but does not apply any motive power. Ships use their sublight thrusters for motive power at FTL. There are several varieties of thruster, varying in performance versus economy. All ships are equipped with arrays of hydrogen-oxygen reaction control thrusters for maneuvering. Ion drives electrically accelerate charged particles as a reaction mass. They are extremely efficient but produce negligible thrust. They are mainly used for automated cargo barges. The primary commercial engine is a fusion torch, which vents the plasma of the ship's power plant. Fusion torches offer powerful acceleration at the cost of difficult heat management. Torch fuel is fairly cheap. Helium-3 skimmed from gas giants and deuterium extracted from seawater or cometary bodies. Propellant is hydrogen, likewise skimmed from gas giants. In combat, military vessels require accelerations beyond the capability of fusion torches. Warship thrusters inject antiprotons into a reaction chamber filled with hydrogen. The matter-antimatter annihilation provides unmatched motive power. Drawback is fuel production. Antiprotons must be manufactured one particle at a time. Most antimatter production is done at massive solar arrays orbiting energetic stars, making them high-value targets in wartime. The exhaust of fusion and antiproton drives is measured in millions of degrees Celsius. Any vessel caught behind them will melt like wax in a blowtorch. Any long-duration interstellar flight consists of two phases, acceleration and deceleration. Starships accelerate to the halfway point of their journey, then flip 180 degrees and apply thrust on the opposite vector, decelerating as they finish the trip. The engines are always operating and peak speed is attained at the middle of the flight. Wow, this is quite the codex entry, guys. the science in this is quite challenging for me to keep up, honestly. Yeah, not to mention the length of this episode. And also the losing of my voice, but yeah, let's power through it, guys. We're almost there. Okay. First problem, I don't know what motive power is. And okay. So here, sublight thrusters are used for motive power at FTL. So I'm thinking when ships get into FTL, they use these thrusters to for a boost in motive power, since they're already moving at faster than light speeds, I guess. And also there's a mention of another kind of thrusters, which is the hydrogen-oxygen reaction control ones, to maneuver. And then there's the ion drives, which are efficient but produce negligible thrust, mainly used for automated cargo barges. What are those? I'm not so sure. But yeah, another noteworthy engine is the fusion torch. But in combat, we need more than that. And involves the use of matter antimatter annihilation. And antimatter is very, very rare. That part I get quite easily. But the exhaust of which is measured in the order of millions of degrees Celsius. Why not use that as a weapon then? I guess it would be difficult to navigate the ship. That means the ship would be like Tokyo drifting around the battlefield, trying to get close with orienting the heat of their engine into the enemy's faces. Yeah, which would be very hard to do. Wonder if Joker can pull off such maneuver though. And also, this last thing is also very interesting. So, yeah, acceleration, deceleration, easy enough to understand, but starships accelerate to the halfway point and then flip 180 degrees and apply thrust on the opposite vector. I don't think we have seen the Normandy do this. Does that mean any of our flights so far have yet to be long duration in nature? Or maybe normally have another way to apply thrust on the opposite vector. Maybe they have some kind of I don't know. Normally maybe can turn the thrusters on the x-axis or something like that, which I don't imagine would work. It would burn part of the Normandy then, right? But I'm pretty sure we have yet to see the Normandy turn around and then decelerate in that way, right? Not sure, guys, not sure. I think we definitely saw the Normandy not pass through, but make use of a mass relay to go very, very fast to a certain direction. But have we seen the other end of that process? I forgot. but I find it hard to believe that any starship would turn around in the middle of using a mass relay, in the middle of being propelled by any mass relays, right? Any such maneuvers would be done after they reach the destination mass relay, I imagine. Yeah, something interesting to think about. Okay, let's move on to the next entry. Weapons. Ablative armor. A warship's kinetic barriers reduce the damage from solid objects, can do nothing to block guardian lasers, particle beams, and other forms of directed energy weapon, or DEW. The inner layer of warship protection consists of ablative armor plate designed to boil away when heated. The vaporized armor material scatters a DEW beam, rendering it ineffectual. A scaffold is built around the interior pressure hull, with sheets of ablative armor hung from the structure. Ships typically have multiple layers of armor separated by empty baffles, spaces often used for cargo storage. Cruisers, which lack the internal space to fit dedicated fighter hangars, store the shipboard fighter complement in the baffles. It is not unknown for enlisted crew to build illicit alcohol distilleries in some obscure corner of the baffles, safe from prying eyes. Okay, quite the short entry we got here, but yeah, so apparently kinetic barriers in a warship is used for protection against solid objects like debris, asteroid, and the like. But against DEWs, ablative armor plays the main role. Interesting that they work by being boiled away when heated by said DEWs. Because when boiled away, it it scatters the beams, rendering it ineffectual. Interesting. And I'm guessing the sheets of ablative armor is how the ablative armor gets renewed, right? Because I imagine once they boil away, they need to be replaced, right? Yeah, they don't go into such details here, but pretty much I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Like it's not like they boil away and then they reform, I don't think. So I wonder if with enough persistence we can keep shooting a DEW until a starship exhausts its sheets of ablative armor, and then after which a DEW will eventually puncture the starship. Perhaps. And oh yeah, of course the ships have multiple layers of armor. So I guess they don't renew, they just, yeah. Well, I imagine when they are docked, they will renew it, right? Or maybe like recycle, like next layers are moved up. Yeah, the deeper layers are moved outwards, and then they put new layers in the inner layer, something like that, I imagine. And yeah, the empty baffles that separate layers of armor are used for cargo storage or illicit alcohol distilleries. Interesting. Though I guess that also implies the size of such baffles, which would be considerable, right? Okay, the last category for today. We are nearing the 2-hour mark. This is more than twice our usual episodes, guys. But yeah, let's go into the last category for today. I believe we read this before, so we go... Oh, there's only 2 entries left. We're not long from the end of the episode. Let's go with this one. Communications Administration. While convoys allow rapid transmission, there's a finite amount of bandwidth available. Given that trillions of people may be trying to pass a message through a given buoy at any one time, access to the network is parceled out on priority tiers. The Citadel Council inspectors have absolute priority. If they are using all the bandwidth, everyone else must wait. Individual governments and their militaries enjoy the next highest tier. During wartime, civilian communication can suffer hours or even days of lag. Intelligence agencies study ping time through various systems to predict military buildups. Below the governments and militaries, bandwidth priority is sold to the highest bidder. Media conglomerates, particularly headline news networks, purchase higher priority to provide their viewers with timely information. Corporations that require timely information and response capability, for example, financial institutions and investment firms, also invest heavily in priority access. The funds acquired through sales of bandwidth are used to maintain and expand the communications infrastructure. While everyone with a computer has guaranteed free and unlimited access to the galactic extranet, they are last in line for bandwidth and may have to wait for their requests to be processed. Bandwidth resale corporations use investment capital to purchase blocks of high priority access made available by paid subscription. Interesting. Basically explaining how internet works in the Mass Effect universe, which of course in their universe is called the extranet. Sorry, I don't suppose they are the same thing. I can see the internet still exists for intra-planetary communication, but for interplanetary communication, we use the extranet, which have several tiers of priority as explained by this codex entry. Interesting how the military would study ping time to predict military buildups and choose the next best thing to communicate faster than the enemy does, right? And of course, media conglomerates, financial institutions, investment firms are also very interested in priority access. That puts in mind of the shadow broker. The shadow broker deals in information which, in my understanding, would necessitate a high priority access, right? So maybe he's like, I don't know, next in line after the governments, I guess. Like he paid for such access, I can easily imagine. Or judging from how should I say? How very his business, his lifestyle, the way he organizes his business is very much in the way of the dark side of the world, right? Maybe he secretly have like priority access comparable to the Spectres or the Citadel Council or something like that. Can easily imagine that happening. Yeah, I was just reminded of the shadow broker when reading this codex entry. Okay, the last the last entry for today. Finally. Credits or creds. The standard credit was established by the Citadel's Unified Banking Act as the currency of interstellar trade. The credit has a managed floating exchange rate, calculated in real time by the central bank to maintain the average value of all participating currencies. Some regional currencies are worth more than a credit, and some less. Hard currency can be stolen or counterfeited, so electronic fund transfers are the norm. More importantly, physical transactions cannot be easily tracked, making them ideal for tax evasion or the purchase of illegal goods. When the Alliance joined the Citadel, its various national treasuries were linked into the credit network. A human with a bank account of Mexican pesos, Japanese yen, or Indian rupees can purchase any item priced in credits at fair market value. All economies that participate in the credit network are required to price items in both local currency and credits. Very interesting. Giving us a peek into how the economics of the Mass Effect universe works. We see a glimpse of that specific to the Quarian earlier in this episode, which at this point took place at 2 hours ago. But this one is more general, applies for I would imagine most races in Citadel space. And I'm pretty sure the Volus was involved in the Citadel's Unified Banking Act to some extent, right? So thank you, Volus. Because without it, without the credits, without the act, imagine how much more complicated galactic economics are. But yeah, this is also interesting how hard currency can be stolen or counterfeited, so they are used more for illegal stuff. I wonder if present day e-money solutions would evolve into something resembling the credits we have in the Mass Effect universe. That would be interesting to see. And also interesting how they talked about regional currencies. And I thought it was just oh, it's the currency of, I don't know, the Turians or the Asari or the Salarians. But even the various national currencies that we have here on Earth for the humanity are not gone yet. I imagine they would have been unified into a single currency that worked for humanity specifically, right, to be used on Earth and on the various human colonies. But no, in the Mass Effect universe at least 2183, there are still Mexican pesos, Japanese yen, or Indian rupees, among other currencies, being used for business. And makes sense with the very last sentence for today. Of all economies that participate in the credit network are required to price items in both local currency and credits. So good old, I don't know, US dollars still work in Mass Effect universe, guys. I wonder if any of the people we met brought some cash with them. Wouldn't seem so, because physical transactions are mainly used for illegal stuff, but I don't know, the fact that currencies we know today still exist, I think people would deal with those local currencies more in physical form rather than electronic form, no? I don't know. Maybe it's very possible that I'm misunderstanding some things, but yeah, I know more of how the economics works in the Mass Effect universe now. And that finally ends this episode. I need to drink. I need to drink more. Though honestly, I don't know how drinking would work with the memoji I'm using right now. But yeah, we learned quite a lot today about the Krogan and the Quarians, various aspects of their lives, and more about the Citadel, the Presidium, and the wards, and then the humanity and the Systems Alliance, how our relations are to the various races that live in the Milky Way galaxy. We even learned about military ranks, the titles. What did we learn for this one? We learned about the Arctur Station, which I forgot to mention are also where some starship building takes place in. We learned about that from one of the codex entries that we read after this one. And we learned more about space battle, space warfare, difference between starship types. We also learned more about fighters, and last but not least, we learned more about communications and economics in this Mass Effect universe. Oh my god, my pronunciation goes away with my voice apparently. But yeah, I am always interested in going over the lore of this game, and as established before, we are going to create these SC episodes in between chapters. Now, I do not think that we will uncover as many codex entries in the next chapter, right? Because it would make sense for information to be front-loaded in any game, right? Which I assume would be the case with Mass Effect 1 Legendary Edition as well, this game that we're playing. But yeah, the length of this episode alone, over 2 hours, makes me reevaluate only making SC episodes in between chapters. Like, that may be not the best idea. Maybe I should have split this episode in two or something like that. But let's see. I guess one of the lessons learned is, before creating episode SC-3, I'm gonna check out how many entries we have, and judging from that, I'm gonna either create one or multiple SC episodes for that chapter, if that makes sense. Yeah, I'll try not to make a 2-hour episode like this one again in the future, if at all possible, because I can see how you will get tired of my voice. I got tired of my voice. So yeah, but thank you very much, even more than usual, for sticking with me through to the end, until the end of this episode. I hope you find this enjoyable, those of you who chose to watch these SC episodes. I hope you find these lore to be to be rewarding to go over and analyze. With all the time that we did it. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of this playthrough, in which we are going to find Yara Tisoni. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to get back into the gameplay. And yeah, once again, honestly, thank you very much. And goodbye for now. I hope you will have the very best day later on today. Thank you very much, and see you next time.